I never thought a crumpled piece of paper from 1973 would bind me to the place I'd long sought to escape. As I sat on the edge of my bed, the looming boxes filled with memories of a life left behind, my hands trembled, clutching that note as if it were a lifeline. The words danced before my eyes, each stroke a reminder of love lost, of a promise made to a younger me who believed in forever. The house felt empty, echoes of laughter now replaced by shadows. My children had their own lives, their own stories far away, and I had felt their absence like an unhealed wound. I was ready to trade this chapter of solitude for the warmth of familiarity. Yet here I was, reconsidering everything because of a letter that spoke of hopes and dreams that never came to fruition. Perhaps I wasn't meant to leave just yet. Perhaps some stories are meant to linger, to remind us that we're never truly abandoned. Before I go on, subscribe to the channel. Here we tell stories no one else does. Stories of grandmas and grandpas the world tried to silence. The sun was just beginning to rise that morning, painting the sky a soft pink. As I sat at my kitchen table, the faint smell of coffee mingling with the scent of old wood and faded wallpaper. My home was a blend of memories, with each creak of the floorboards beneath my feet whispering tales of the past. This house, with its cracked plaster walls and heavy oak furniture, had witnessed decades of life. Births, laughter, arguments, and the silent moments that felt like eternity. I often found solace here, surrounded by the familiar contours of the living room, the pictures hanging askew on the walls, reminding me of family gatherings, birthdays, and holidays long gone. As I sipped my coffee, the steam curling around my fingers, I picked up the framed photograph on the table. It was of my late husband, Henry, laughing with our grandchildren, their innocent joy captured forever in that single moment. I could almost hear his voice, rich and warm, resonating through the air, filling the room with memories that spanned nearly half a century. The silence in the house felt alive, echoing the laughter we once shared, the love that had built this home. I closed my eyes, letting the past wash over me like a gentle tide, and began to think about the move. I had been packing away my life, organizing every little thing to downsize for the new apartment that awaited me, a fresh chapter in a world that seemed to rush past me. But that morning, everything changed. It was when I shuffled through a pile of old letters, their envelopes yellowed with age, that I stumbled upon it. A note from 1973, crumpled and worn, its edges frayed like the memories it contained. My hands trembled as I unfolded it, the faint smell of old paper rising to greet me. The words, written in my own hand, were an echo from a time I thought I had left behind. It spoke of dreams, of fears, and of a decision that had shaped my life in ways I hadn't fully understood at the time. In those hurried scrawls, I could see the passion and uncertainty of my younger self, struggling with the crossroads that lay before me, just as I faced another one today. As I read through the letter, each line seemed to tug at my heartstrings. The decision to move back then had been fraught with more than just logistics. It was about leaving behind my childhood home, the only place I had known before stepping into adulthood. I remembered the bittersweet ache of that moment, standing in the empty rooms, a feeling of loss mingling with the thrill of new beginnings. Now, an unmistakable sense of nostalgia washed over me as I realized this note was not just a relic. It was a lifeline reaching back across the years, begging me to reconsider the path I was about to take. I could feel the weight of its implications pressing down on me, urging me to dig deeper into my own heart and reflect on what I truly wanted. Sitting there, surrounded by echoes of laughter and memories that lived within these walls, I knew that my decision to move wasn't just about finding a new place to live. It was about packing away not just things, but parts of my life, layers of love and grief, hopes and dreams, all intertwined. And in that moment, I questioned whether I was ready to let go of this home that had cradled me through the storms of life. This note from the past had awakened something within me, a longing for roots and stability that I thought I had overcome. The vision of a new apartment faded, replaced by the warmth of familiarity that enveloped me here in my aging house, a sanctuary of years gone by. I realized that I had a choice, and for the first time in weeks, It felt as if the decision might not lie in the boxes I had packed, but in the whispers of my own heart. As I sit here in my cozy armchair, the sunlight filtering through the lace curtains, I can't help but reflect on the person I was back in 1973, a time when life seemed both simpler and infinitely more complicated. I was a young woman then, filled with dreams and aspirations, but also weighed down by the burdens of expectation and reality. The world felt like a canvas, my paintbrush poised to create a masterpiece of my choosing. Yet in the shadows lurked fears that kept me tethered to the ground. I often wonder where that adventurous spirit went, replaced by the cautious acceptance of what life presented to me. When I found that yellowed letter tucked away in an old box last month, it was as if time had folded in on itself, revealing a part of me I had long forgotten. The ink was faded but legible, and in those flowing cursive letters, I recognized the naive enthusiasm of my 20-something self yearning for more. The words spoke of dreams to travel abroad, to dance under foreign stars, and to live a life free from the confines of our small town. Back then, I believed that I could be anyone, go anywhere, and carve my own path without asking for permission. Now I find myself reminiscing about those aspirations with a twinge of regret, realizing how much I let slip away. The letter also acted as a mirror, reflecting the woman I have become. I spent years nurturing my family, pouring my love into my children and grandchildren, and making sacrifices I didn't always question. In the chaos of raising them, I lost sight of those dreams I had penned in that letter. I became grandma, a title I cherish, but in some ways it overshadowed who I once was. I often find myself wondering if the years of dedication and love were worth the dreams I left unfulfilled. Was I right to prioritize family, or did I lose a part of myself in the process? The question haunts me as I navigate through my golden years, trying to find meaning beyond the familiar roles I play. Yet, that letter has reignited a spark deep within me. It served as a gentle yet firm reminder that while life is often about responsibilities, it's also about self-discovery and fulfillment. I realized that the dreams I once had were not meant to be buried forever. They could coexist with my current life if I only allowed myself the grace to pursue them, even in small ways. Perhaps I could take a painting class, travel to a place I've never been, or simply visit the local art gallery that I've neglected for years. The possibilities are suddenly tantalizing, and I feel a familiar thrill stirring in my heart, one I thought had been lost to time. In my soul-searching, I recognize that who I was and who I am now are pieces of a larger puzzle. The adventurous young woman still flickers inside me, no matter how long I've been playing the role of caretaker. I owe it to that version of myself to explore what it means to embrace both identities and blend them together, creating something wholly unique. It won't be easy, of course. The mundane routines of life still beckon, but with that old letter serving as a beacon, I feel more determined than ever to weave new threads into the fabric of my existence. This is not simply about reclaiming lost dreams. It's about evolving and allowing myself to be more than just grandma, but a whole person, full of stories and possibilities waiting to unfold. It was a crisp autumn afternoon when the letter arrived, its presence almost haunting. I had taken a long, careful inventory of my life and decided it was time for a new beginning, one that promised to be filled with excitement and adventure. I had even packed a few boxes, each filled with trinkets from a past life that now seemed too heavy for my spirit to carry. I wanted to leave behind the old family home, too many memories crammed into each corner, too many echoes of laughter that had faded into silence. But that letter, so inconspicuous yet so powerful, turned my world upside down. As I sat down at my kitchen table, the smell of stale coffee clung to the air, mingling with the scent of the damp leaves wafting through the slightly cracked window. With trembling hands, I opened the envelope. The letter was from 1973, a time when the world was vibrant with change, and I was a bright-eyed young woman, unable to see the roads that lay ahead. My heart raced as I began to read the familiar handwriting of my late sister, Margaret. The words felt alive, pulling me back to a time I thought I had neatly boxed away. Her letter spoke of dreams she had for herself, for me, and for our family. Dreams so big they seemed to burst through the page. Margaret wrote about moving to the city, the thrill of new opportunities, and her hopes for a better life. She described the colors and sounds of a bustling metropolis that felt like a heartbeat, a place where her aspirations could take flight. As I read, tears welled up in my eyes. I remembered our endless conversations about how we would conquer the world together, how we would support each other through every turn. "We can do this," she had said, her voice a lively melody in my memory. I had never shared those aspirations with anyone else, not even my husband. The weight of her loss felt heavier with each word, and it stirred a remorse I didn't know I still held. I realized in that moment that my desire to move was not just about seeking something new. It was a direct response to the grief of losing her and the responsibilities that had piled up like dust on the shelves. I had convinced myself that leaving this home, this life, would allow me to escape the anguish of missing her, the regrets of unfulfilled promises. Yet, as I sat there, her words pressed against my heart like a gentle reminder. There was still time to honor our shared dreams. I could not abandon the hope we once cherished together. Instead of uprooting my life, perhaps it was time to breathe new life into the world around me. Suddenly, the boxes I had so carefully packed seemed like a prison for my spirit. I had been preparing to vacate the past, but all I really needed was to transform it. The little garden that Margaret and I had nurtured could flourish again. A fresh coat of paint on the walls could rejuvenate our home. I began to envision how I could turn the house into a gallery of memories rather than a museum of loss. I could invite laughter back into these old rooms, maybe even host tea parties or knitting circles for the neighborhood. The thought excited me and filled me with warmth that had long eluded me. That letter shifted something deep within me, a realization that not all change must mean departure. Sometimes change is about reimagining the life we've built and finding the beauty in the familiar. And so, I folded Margaret's letter carefully, promising to carry her spirit forward. The next day, I began rearranging furniture, planting new flowers in my garden, and filling my home with laughter once more. In honoring my sister's dreams, I found my own, one that would allow me to stay rooted, yet flourish. I remember the moment the letter arrived vividly, even though it's been 50 years since that day. The postman handed me the envelope with a flicker of curiosity in his eyes, but when I saw that familiar handwriting, one I had not laid eyes on in decades, my heart sank. The ink, faded and blotchy, spelled out the name of someone I had spent countless nights dreaming about, regretting and sometimes hating. It was a note from my younger self, a woman who was consumed by the flames of passionate youth. A woman unrecognizable to me now, sitting in my neatly arranged living room, filled with the remnants of a life well lived. As I unfolded the crisp paper, the years seemed to dissolve. That childhood bedroom I left so long ago surfaced in my mind. The wallpaper peeling in the corners, the whiff of old books mingling with the scent of fresh linens. I had written the letter in the summer of 1973, a plea to my future self, a flash of hope that reverberated through the years. The words spilled forth from my pen with a rawness I had nearly forgotten. The letter was filled with a sense of urgency, cautioning me against ignoring the roots I had so desperately tried to escape. It spoke of love, loss, and the inevitable silence that comes with distance. Reading those words now, I felt an ache deep in my chest, like a reminder of the choices that had led me here. I was on the brink of a new chapter. At the age of 75, I had decided to move across the country to be closer to my children and grandchildren. It seemed like the logical step. After all, how long can you remain in a place that feels like a ghost town after the love of your life has departed? Yet, as I read the letter, I was taken aback by the intensity of those young feelings. I could practically hear the echoes of laughter and arguments, the very essence of my past within those ink-stained lines. The letter warned me of the dangers of running away from what I knew, cautioned me to not allow the distance to create a divide that could never be bridged. Something shifted in me that afternoon. The anticipation of moving to a new city, filled with the bright-eyed exuberance of my family, felt dulled against the backdrop of my past. I understood then that it wasn't just a matter of geography, but a reckoning with the silence that had reigned in my life for much too long. Every attempt to distance myself from my roots was marred by a sense of loss, the kind that can only grow sharper with time. The letter turned into a mirror, reflecting parts of myself I had either neglected or buried under layers of practicality and hope, revealing emotions I thought I had successfully compartmentalized. That night, I stood by the dim light of my old desk, contemplating my next steps. I could feel the weight of the letter in my hands, and with it came the realization that maybe my past wasn't something to flee from. Instead of packing my life into boxes, I chose to breathe deeply and embrace the love that had been forged in silence over the years. I picked up my phone and called my daughter, and for the first time in years, I felt the warmth of connection rather than the chill of distance. The decision to stay was not about fear of the unknown, but a chance to reconcile with the memories that had shaped who I was. In that moment, I realized that the silence of my past could finally give way to the vibrant sounds of family, love, and perhaps even forgiveness. It was a chilly afternoon in late October when the letter arrived. The bright yellow envelope, with its faint aroma of old books and memories, sat on my kitchen table as though it held all the secrets of the past. I had been preparing for weeks to finalize my move to a new city, a fresh start at 72 years old. But the moment I saw that envelope, my heart raced with a confusing mix of anxiety and nostalgia. I recognized the familiar handwriting instantly. It was from my eldest son, Mark. The words inside would shift the very ground beneath my feet. As I unfolded the paper, I was struck by the date inscribed at the top, 1973. I felt a sharp breath catch in my throat. Mark had written it during a tumultuous time in our lives, a year when he still felt the weight of his teenage years and grappling with the world around him. The letter spoke of dreams unfulfilled, of struggles with self-identity, and the longing for connection that seemed to escape him. As I read, I could feel the raw pain radiating from every sentence, a pain I had been blissfully unaware of at the time. My heart sank as I realized how oblivious I had been to his struggles, consumed by my own battles of that era. In that moment, I was transported back to a kitchen not unlike my own. I could almost hear the echoes of laughter, the clatter of dishes, and the weight of unspoken words that hung in the air. I had been busy, too busy to notice that my son was fighting his inner demons. I remembered my own worries, the pressures of finances, work, and family responsibilities that had taken precedence. But reading those words, I felt an overwhelming wave of guilt wash over me, the first emotional blow that made me question every decision I had made, every missed moment of connection with him. Mark concluded the letter with a heartfelt plea for understanding. He wrote about wanting to be seen, heard, and loved unconditionally. I could feel his desperation, a cry for help from the past. "I just wanted you to know, Mom, that I didn't always feel like I belonged," he had written, and that hit me harder than any physical blow ever could. Here I was, at a point in my life where I had hoped to cherish the transition to a new chapter, yet this letter was pulling me back into a complicated web of emotions. It was a reminder that moving on didn't mean leaving behind the past or the people in it. I folded the letter carefully, placing it back into its envelope with trembling hands. My plans to move suddenly felt distant and trivial. How could I leave when there were unresolved feelings waiting to be faced? I could no longer dismiss the past as something to be swept under the rug. It was a part of me, a part of Mark, and perhaps we both needed to confront it together before I could even think about embarking on a new journey. My heart ached for the boy he once was, and the man he had become, realizing then that my decision to move would not just affect me, but ripple through the family dynamics I had struggled to navigate for years. In my old age, I was beginning to grasp that some burdens could only be shared to truly lighten the load, and perhaps it was time to face them head on. I sat in my old armchair, the smell of dust lingering in the air around me, when I found the envelope tucked between the yellowed pages of a book I hadn't opened in years. The book itself bore the marks of time. The spine was cracked, and each page felt fragile between my fingers. But it was the envelope that caught my attention. Simple, unassuming, yet it held the weight of memories I had buried long ago. My heart raced as I carefully opened it, a familiar scent wafting up, old paper mixed with a hint of lavender. I recognized it instantly. It was her scent, my long-lost friend, Anne. Inside was a letter, neatly folded, and as I began reading, the words transported me back to a time when life was less complicated, or perhaps just less understood. "Dear Clara," it started, and I could almost hear Anne's voice echoing in my mind, filled with warmth and vibrant life. She had been a whirlwind of energy, a bright spark who lit up even the darkest of days. Reading her words, I felt a pang of nostalgia mixed with sorrow, a reminder of how quickly time had slipped through my fingers. We had shared secrets, dreams, and yes, even heartaches that shaped the course of our lives. Yet there it was, in the very fabric of her letter, a secret, one I had never wanted to revisit. Anne wrote about a moment we had both experienced, one that had haunted not only my thoughts, but also our friendship. It referred to the boy we both had feelings for, the one who never knew the depth of our affection. She revealed, in delicate detail, a love she had harbored for him that I had never understood until now. The pain of that revelation struck me like a cold wave. I had buried so many feelings beneath the surface, and now they were rising up, choking me with regret. I had made the decision to move away, to start anew, to leave behind the tangled web of feelings and memories that had become my cage. But as I read on, the pieces began to fall into place. Anne had never had the chance to express her love, to confront the tangled mess we had made of our hearts, and I had never acknowledged the intricate dance of jealousy and longing between us. I had thought my departure would quiet the storms within me, but perhaps it had only fanned the flames. The notion that her words, even after all these years, still had the power to sway my heart was staggering. I realized in that moment that my decision to move wasn't just about escaping my past. It was an evasion of the truths that had woven themselves into the fabric of our friendship. Setting the letter down, I stared at the wall, lost in thought. I could feel the weight of those unspoken words hanging heavily in the air, urging me to confront the reality I had avoided for too long. Did Anne still think of me? Did she wonder why I had slipped away without so much as a goodbye? The prospect of reaching out filled me with fear, yet it also ignited a flicker of hope. The secret we shared needed resolution, a bridge rebuilt between our lives, if only to honor what had once been. I took a deep breath, feeling the ache of the past intertwine with the present. Perhaps it was time to finally confront those shadows, to seek a closure that had long been overdue. I never thought I would find that letter again. It had been tucked away in a box, buried beneath years of dust and memories. I was preparing for my move, packing up a lifetime of belongings, when my fingers brushed against the worn edge of an envelope. The moment I pulled it out, my heart sank. I recognized the handwriting immediately. It belonged to him, my first love, James. A note from 1973 that had haunted me all this time, and now it resided in my hands like an unwanted ghost. I stood in the middle of my living room, surrounded by half-filled boxes and a certainty that had once seemed invincible. I was ready to leave this old house, the one I had lived in for the better part of 4 decades, and start anew. The thought of moving had brought a sense of excitement and liberation. Yet now, holding that letter, I felt as if my entire world had tilted off its axis. Those words, scrawled in a mix of hope and desperation, echoed the ache that had settled deep within me. The wound that never healed had been reopened, and I found myself grappling with memories I had tried so hard to suppress. James had written about dreams of us together, about the life we would build once we graduated, how we would be unstoppable. But the reality was kinder to the past than to our youthful aspirations. I read his words and remembered the day he said goodbye, the day he left for the army, the day my heart shattered into pieces. I could still feel the weight of that moment, heavy on my chest. The choices we made in our youth often seemed so simple, but they unraveled into threads that wove the rest of our lives, binding us to paths we never intended to travel. I had moved on, or so I thought, but that letter proved otherwise. I found myself questioning every decision I had made since that day. The heartbreak had been a catalyst that pushed me toward other relationships, but none felt quite right. I married, had children, and poured myself into their lives, always with one foot in the past, wondering what could have been. I had buried those feelings under layers of responsibility and routine, thinking that time would heal me. Yet here I was, holding a piece of my past, and I was reminded that some wounds never truly close. They merely scab over, waiting for a reason to bleed again. In that moment, I knew I couldn't move. Not yet. The thrill of a fresh start was pulled back by the gravity of unresolved feelings. I had to confront this part of my history before I could leap into the unknown. I needed clarity, not just about James and our youthful dreams, but about myself. The memories flooded back, not with bitterness, but with a bittersweet nostalgia that seemed to be begging for acknowledgement. I wasn't simply an old woman trying to discard her past. I was a tapestry woven from the threads of every joy, heartache, and dream unfulfilled. I could feel the pieces of my heart rearranging as I stood there in that old house, realizing that the future I envisioned would never truly be mine until I reckoned with my past. As I stood in my sunlit living room, the letter trembling in my aged hands, I felt an unexpected swirl of emotions crash over me. It had been over 50 years since I last saw Thomas, and in that time, I had managed to bury those memories deep beneath the layers of my life. The note I held was a time capsule from 1973, a lifeline from a past that felt like a dream, so distant, yet achingly familiar. I could still recall that summer afternoon, the air thick with anticipation as we sat under the willow tree, whispering secrets as the sunlight flickered through the leaves. I had convinced myself that I was moving on, leaving it all behind, but standing there, I felt every ounce of that past clawing back to the surface. The letter had been addressed to me, surprising since I had long believed that our paths had permanently diverged. It contained words he had scribbled with urgency, filled with confessions of love and longing that had never been shared. In those youthful exchanges, we had been so naive, so certain that the world was ours. Yet, life had pulled us down different roads, and I had wrapped my heart in practicality, choosing stability over dreams. Now, as I read those lines, every stroke of his pen echoed the unfulfilled promise of what we might have had, and I was left reeling from the realization that perhaps I hadn't truly moved on at all. With a trembling hand, I reached for my phone, my mind racing back to the days when everything felt possible. I punched in the numbers I had memorized long ago, my heart thumping in my chest as I waited, each ring an echo of my uncertainty. When he finally answered, his voice had aged, carrying the weight of our years apart. Yet there was a familiarity that wrapped around me like an old sweater. "Sarah," he said, the name almost a whisper. In that moment, I was no longer a grandmother with gray hair, but the young woman who had once soared on the wings of hope and love, yearning to reconnect after all this time. We talked for hours, sharing the mundane details of our lives, the choices that had led us to this moment. It felt surreal to hear him laugh again, to share memories that had always been tucked away in my heart like hidden treasures. Through the anecdotes and shared experiences, I could feel the connection rekindling, the flame that had flickered dimly throughout the years finding new life. I thought of the life I had planned, my move to the retirement community, the quiet days ahead filled with predictable routines. In that moment, all that seemed so trivial compared to the chance of reuniting with Thomas, a second chance at something beautiful that we had let slip away. As the sun began to set, casting a golden hue across my living room, the weight of the decision ahead pressed heavily upon me. I glanced at the suitcase I had already packed, ready to embark on a new chapter, yet my heart was caught in a tug of war between the known future and the possibilities of the past. Thomas's voice echoed in my mind, a comforting balm against the fears of change and the unknown. Would it be foolish of me to entertain the idea of starting anew? To step away from the life I had meticulously crafted for myself? Or was this the universe's way of reminding me that life is too short not to embrace love, wherever it may lead? Whatever the answer, as I contemplated my next move, I knew one thing for certain. Thomas's note had given me hope, and that was the first step toward reclaiming the life I thought I had lost. As I sat there, the envelope crinkling in my grasp, the memories rushed back like a tidal wave. My hands trembled, and I had to swallow hard to prevent the swell of emotion from overtaking me. It had been years since I'd seen that familiar handwriting, a jagged scrawl that spoke of both elegance and turmoil. My heart raced as I opened the letter, pulling it out with the gentleness one reserves for something precious. What lay within was a piece of my past that I had buried deep, thinking I could escape its weight. The letter was dated July 1973, penned during a summer of fading youth and emerging responsibilities. In those days, my heart was as wild as my hair, full of dreams, yet tethered by fears. My mother had been unwell, and I was grappling with the reality of stepping into adulthood while trying to care for a family that felt like it was slowly unraveling. As I read the letter, each word felt like a tiny spark igniting something dormant within me. It was written by my dear friend Lila, the very soul who had urged me to take risks, to embrace life in all its colors, yet I had walked away from that world to care for others, burying my desires under the weight of obligation. Lila's words unfolded a different reality, one filled with encouragement and an unyielding spirit that seemed so foreign to me now. She described a life without limitations, a whirlwind of adventures that beckoned us beyond the borders of our small town. But as I continued to read, my heart sank as her tone shifted, her frustration palpable as she pleaded with me not to surrender myself entirely to others. "You've always been so strong," she had written, "but don't let that strength bind you. We need to chase our dreams, not hide from them." Each sentence was a reminder of the vibrant person I once was and the chains I had locked around my own heart. In that moment, I was confronted by the discontent I had tried so hard to ignore. I felt an emotional release building inside me, a tension I had contained for decades now pushing against the walls I had constructed. The bitterness of unfulfilled dreams mixed with the sweetness of cherished memories, creating a cocktail of regret and longing. How many choices had I made that led me away from the woman I wanted to be? How many chances had I let slip through my fingers out of fear or obligation? Tears welled up as I thought of Lila, lost to time and distance, and I felt the weight of her love and encouragement pressing against my chest. I finally allowed myself to confront that reality, to release the emotions that had built up over the years like a dam ready to burst. I had chosen my family, yes, but at what cost? It was as though Lila was still with me, urging me to reconsider the path I had taken. I could hear her voice in my mind, fierce and unwavering, reminding me that I could still carve out a piece of life that was mine. I set the letter down and took a deep breath, tasting the dust of old dreams on my tongue. It was time to acknowledge my desires, to honor the flight of my youth that I had clipped in the name of duty. As I sat among the clutter of my living room, the letter resting heavy in my hands, I felt the stirrings of a new resolve. This note from long ago had become a tangible piece of my emotional landscape, shifting the earth beneath my feet. No longer could I hide behind my choices, nor could I drown in their shadows. I would take this as a call to action, a reminder that it's never too late to reclaim a part of myself I had long since let go. I stood up, heart beating steadily, breath aligned with purpose, ready to contemplate what chasing my dreams could look like at this stage of my life, with room enough to grow once more. I sat down at my small, round kitchen table, a familiar spot where countless conversations and meals had transpired over the years. The sunlight streamed through the window, casting soft patterns on the worn, checkered cloth, but the warmth it offered felt distant, swallowed by the chill of memories clawing their way into the forefront of my mind. I had been preparing to leave, to pack up 30 years of life in this small house, anxious to embrace what I thought was a new beginning in Florida. But that letter, that unexpected letter from 1973, changed everything. It had arrived days earlier, tucked among the mundane bills and advertisements, a relic from my past that made my heart race and my hands tremble. My first instinct had been to toss it aside, a piece of nostalgia best left forgotten. But something compelled me to open it. The moment I unfolded the brittle paper, the familiar scent of ink and age rushed over me, pulling me back to a time I thought I had long since buried. The letter was a note to myself, written during a summer when I was young and reckless, full of dreams but also riddled with uncertainty. The words spilled out in a flurry of excitement, detailing plans I had made with friends, aspirations of travel and adventure, the thrill of exploring the world. But underneath that youthful bravado lay an anchor of anxiety, a plea to remember to embrace love wherever it appeared, to hold on to the fleeting moments that make life worth living. It struck me to my core. The note was a reminder of all I had ever wanted, but also a map of the regrets I had buried deep within, experiences I had pushed aside in the name of practicality and security. As I reread the letter, a flash of remembrance washed over me, faces, laughter, and a summer night filled with promises I never kept. I could hear my best friend Laura's voice, urging me to step outside of my comfort zone, to explore life without restraint. For years, I had clung to the idea of a responsible life, prioritizing stability over spontaneity, attempting to craft a perfect narrative that ultimately felt flat and unfulfilling. I had promised myself I'd travel, but those trips to distant shores always felt like mirages, enticing but ultimately unreachable. Suddenly, the prospect of moving to Florida didn't feel like a new chapter. It felt like running away. Here I was, on the brink of a decision that would lead me to the unknown, and yet I realized I had been avoiding the most significant journey of all, the one into my own heart and the life I had left behind. I had a choice to make, one steeped in uncertainty, and for the first time in ages, I found myself asking whether I could reclaim those lost dreams. In that moment, I picked up the phone and dialed Laura's number, knowing in my heart that this conversation might just be the reconciliation I didn't know I needed. As I sat at my kitchen table, the dim light of the afternoon sun filtering through the dusty window, I couldn't help but think of my family's reaction to the decision I had nearly made. The letter had stirred something deep within me, a reminder of the roots I had nearly uprooted. Martha, my eldest, had always been the practical one, quick to echo the voice of reason. She was the first to express her doubts when I first confided my plans to move into that lovely little retirement community by the lake. "Mom, it's a big change," she had said, her brow furrowed with concern. That steady gaze of hers had always made me feel like she was trying to see through all the layers I often kept hidden. But as I pulled that yellowed envelope from the box in the attic, the sepia-toned letters inside seemed to challenge everything I thought I knew about what was best for me. "What if you need help?" my son David had added when he learned about my thoughts. "You don't want to be a burden." His words stung, a reminder of the frailty that comes with age. I had never wanted to be a burden to my children. I raised them to be independent, after all. Yet somehow, the idea of me living on my own, potentially struggling, had struck a nerve. That's when I realized my plans had never just been about me. They were threads woven into a bigger tapestry of family dynamics, expectations, and fears. Martha and David were not alone in their concerns. My sister, Anne, who had always been my confidant, was the one who had the hardest time hiding her bewilderment. "Why do you want to leave us?" she had asked, in a voice tinged with emotion. It wasn't as if I were moving to the other side of the world, but in her eyes, it felt monumental. I could see the wheels turning in her mind. Would I still be part of the family gatherings? Would I still be able to join them at the holidays? The fear of being forgotten, of drifting away from the ones I loved, gnawed at my heart. I never intended to fracture our close-knit bond, but the prospect of a new beginning was both exhilarating and terrifying. The past has a way of impacting our future, and those letters from 1973 were more than just a charming bit of nostalgia. They were a revelation about the kind of life I once envisioned. They urged me to hold on to the relationships that mean the most to me. As I read through my own words penned decades ago, I felt a longing to connect the dots between my youthful dreams and the reality of my present. I realized that my family's concerns stemmed from a place of love, a deep-rooted attachment cultivated over years and shared experiences. They didn't want to lose me, and in some odd way, neither did I. So I delayed my move. I sat down with my children and sister over coffee, the aroma of freshly brewed beans hanging in the air, and for the first time, I truly listened to their fears and hopes. I shared with them my own dreams of that lakeside life, but I also conveyed how much they meant to me. I wanted them to know that my roots were not just about soil or a house, but about them. In that moment, I felt our family bond strengthen, as if it had been wrapped in a thick quilt, woven from all our shared memories. It may not have been the dream I had painted for myself, but it was a dream that included all the precious threads of those I loved. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I knew I had made the right choice, a choice that honored both my independence and my deep-seated need for family. I stood there, frozen in time, with the yellowed letter clutched in my hands. It felt like the weight of years pressed against my chest, and I could hardly breathe. I had been prepared to pack my life into boxes and move to a smaller apartment in a quieter neighborhood. The thought of starting anew had excited me. I imagined walking to the local cafe, meeting new people, and perhaps knitting in the park on sunny afternoons. Yet there I was, trembling at the revelation that came from a piece of paper dated nearly 5 decades ago. A handwritten note from a woman I had long since left behind, a woman whose inkling surged back into my life with the force of a tidal wave. Her words reached out to me, like a ghost whispering stories I had buried deep within my heart. "Remember who you are," she wrote. "Do not forget the dreams you had when you were young." It pierced through the layers of me that I had neatly folded away. I remember those dreams vividly, the sparks of ambition that danced in my chest as a young girl. How I wanted to travel the world, to become an artist who painted wild landscapes and bustling cityscapes. But life happened. Obligations piled up, and I let that vibrant girl fade into the background while I molded myself into a caretaker, a mother, a worker. I often feared that chasing after those dreams would have been selfish, so I tucked them away and focused instead on everything else. That letter made me mourn for the parts of me that I had sacrificed on the altar of responsibility. I could feel anger bubbling beneath the surface, anger directed at myself for allowing that vibrant young girl to be silenced. Was it too late to rediscover her? I walked over to my old easel, dusting it off with shaky hands. The canvas was blank, just like I felt inside. I had let years of doubt convince me that creating art was something I outgrew. But that note was a wake-up call, a gentle reminder that the essence of who I was still lingered within, just waiting for a chance to bloom again. As I pondered my decision to move, I realized that leaving was not the answer. I didn't need to pack my life into boxes to find a new beginning. My journey could start right where I was, within these familiar walls filled with memories, heartbreaks, and joy. I could take each paint stroke as a step towards reclaiming my voice. It felt like armed rebellion against the self-imposed restraints I had lived with for so long. I began to imagine the colors I wanted to splash onto the canvas, the wild strokes that would represent the roaring spirit of the girl who dared to dream. I could still be her, to travel wherever my heart led, even if it was just through a brush and a palette. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I felt an unexpected surge of excitement bubble within me. Rediscovery felt like a long-lost friend returning home. I decided then and there that I would not hide from my past any longer. Instead, I would embrace it. The letter had reopened a door I thought I had shut tight, one that led to parts of myself I had hidden away for far too long. I might be older, my hands a bit shaky, but my spirit had reignited. I would reclaim my artistic dreams, revitalize my heart, and show myself that life was still a canvas awaiting my touch. In that moment, I understood that the future could be as rich and colorful as I dared to make it. As I sit in my faded armchair, the creaking of the wood beneath me feels like a reminder of the years gone by, the multitude of choices that shaped my life. I can still see the letter laid out on my kitchen table, a time capsule from 1973. Each word seemed to echo in the silence, pulling me back to moments that I thought had been resolved, or perhaps buried long ago. The neat script belonged to my younger self, an excited, somewhat naive woman, filled with hope and anticipation about love, family, and new beginnings. But reading it now, it was as if the past slapped me awake, demanding my attention, forcing me to reassess the path I've taken and the relationships I've nurtured, or let wither like dry leaves in a forgotten garden. The letter spoke of my dreams and fears, and it also mentioned a name I hadn't thought about in years: Peter. My heart clenched at the memory of him and the way I had so easily believed we would conquer the world together. Instead, we drifted apart, as if pulled by invisible strings that twined and tangled around our lives until we barely recognized each other. I had convinced myself that time healed all wounds, but the truth is that some scars run deeper than we care to acknowledge. I had never fully resolved what happened between us, and now, reading those youthful dreams, I felt a yearning to confront that unfinished chapter of my life. In that moment, I realized how much I had underestimated the weight of unresolved relationships. The letter wasn't just a recollection, it was a call to action. It urged me to reconsider my decision to move across the country, to start fresh. My heart was already set on a new life filled with excitement, yet here was this fragment of time pleading for resolution. I felt a pang of guilt for having buried Peter, along with the memories we created. It was selfish of me to dismiss the bond we shared, to run away from the uncertainty. In doing so, I had perhaps dimmed the light of our story, allowing doubt to eclipse something beautiful. Yet, as I pondered over this, I also realized that reconciliation isn't always the answer. It's not about reaching out to him or dragging up the past, but about coming to terms with what we once had and what we lost. I had grown, molded by the experiences life had thrown at me, and now I stood at a crossroad. I could choose to embrace my memories of Peter with warmth and gratitude for the laughter and love we shared, without the expectation of rekindling that flame. It was about letting go of the bitterness and resentment I had harbored, and giving both of us the chance to move forward, whether together or apart. As I made my decision, my heart felt lighter. I would not erase Peter from my story. I would simply honor the past while allowing my future to unfold naturally. I saw it now as a tapestry woven with our individual threads, intermingling for a time before veering off into separate patterns. There was beauty in that, in recognizing that we were merely part of each other's journey. I might not have closure in the traditional sense or an unfolding relationship, but I could find peace in acknowledging the imprint he left on my heart. So with a deep breath, I put the letter back into its envelope, closed my eyes, and allowed the memories to wash over me, forever grateful, but ready for whatever lay ahead. As I sat on that old, rickety chair in my living room, the sun filtered through the dusty window, enveloping me in its golden glow. It was an ordinary day, much like any other, with the faint smell of chamomile still lingering in the air from my teacup. I had just begun packing up my life for the move, a decision made rather hastily after the passing of my husband, Frank. But just as I was folding my cherished quilts, my fingers brushed against something familiar, a stack of letters tucked deep in a corner of the drawer. Curiosity pulled me in, and I began to sift through the papers, finally landing on a note that would change everything. The letter was yellowed, the ink faded, but the words were as vibrant as my memories. It was dated 1973, written in Frank's unmistakable handwriting. My heart raced as I unfolded the paper, and a wave of nostalgia washed over me. "Dearest Claire," it began, the salutation wrapping around me like a warm hug. Frank had poured his heart out, reflecting on our shared dreams, our fleeting youth, and the love that had woven together the fabric of our lives. Each line transported me back to a time when our lives were bursting with promise, before life's unpredictabilities began to wear us down. As I read on, I noticed that Frank had mentioned a particular moment, our first dance at the old community center. He'd eloquently detailed how I had spun like a dervish under the dim lights, his eyes sparkling as he watched me. I had forgotten just how innocent and joyful we had been back then, unburdened by the weight of the world. The letter's final words struck me the hardest. "If ever I leave this earth, may you find your way back to the joy we shared. Don't let grief overshadow the love we had." It felt as though he was reaching through time and space, imploring me to reconsider the path I was set on. In that moment of reflection, I could feel the heaviness of my decision lift, replaced with a bittersweet longing for the life we had built together. Frank's note was like a lighthouse in a storm, guiding me back to the shore of my memories, reminding me of the love that had defined my past. Standing there, with the sun casting long shadows on the floor, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. I realized I wasn't ready to erase the home where we had created countless moments, the laughter, the arguments, the quiet evenings spent in comfort. The thought of leaving it behind felt like betraying the very essence of our shared existence. I set the letter down, my fingers trembling from the weight of the decision I had just made. As my heart swelled with emotion, I pictured the future I had almost thrown away. I would not move. I would stay and honor Frank's memory by keeping our home alive in every corner, every creak of the floor. I could reclaim the joy we had, perhaps not in the same way, but by allowing it to flourish within me, even in his absence. The symbolic gesture of staying felt like a final act of love, a promise to continue living, to preserve the essence of who we were together. I could hear the clock ticking in the background, a reminder that time waits for no one. Each tick resonated with the memories I held dear. Yes, things would be different now, but sometimes the most profound change arises from staying put, from choosing to embrace the love embedded in the walls, in the air, and in the very soil of this home. I decided that today would be the day I chose joy over sorrow, a decision guided by a note from decades past. I sat in my old rocking chair, the wood creaking beneath me with each gentle sway. The sun filtered through the lace curtains, painting delicate patterns on the floor that resembled the dreams I had once held dear. I had spent the last few days sifting through memories, unearthing letters, photographs, and yellowed pages that had been tucked away for decades. It was during this endeavor that I stumbled upon that note from 1973, a simple piece of paper that bore witness to my youth and fervor. The ink was faded, but the words struck me with a clarity that felt almost like a heartbeat in my chest. In that moment, I realized how deeply my past had shaped the course of my life. The message penned by my younger self was a plea for courage, a reminder to chase my dreams and the promises I had made to myself during long nights filled with ambition and passion. Yet, here I was, wrestling with the weight of decisions that seemed mundane by comparison, but felt monumental in the light of that note. I had planned to move to a new city, to embrace a fresh start after a lifetime of routines and familiarity. The idea had brought me a flicker of excitement, but the note brought hesitation that settled in my bones. It was as if my former self was reaching through time, urging me to pause, to reconsider what it meant to live boldly. As I sat there, I thought about how easily we dismiss our own dreams in the face of day-to-day realities, the grind of life that can paint over the bright colors of youth with dull strokes of responsibility. I thought of all the times I had put my aspirations aside, prioritizing stability over adventure, playing it safe over taking risks. It wasn't that I regretted my life. I cherished every moment with my family, the laughter, the shared stories, and the little joys. However, I couldn't help but wonder what I might have missed by not following through on that desire to explore the world beyond my cozy, familiar confines. With each passing moment, I wrestled with the implications of that letter. In deciding whether to stay or go, I was confronted with a truth that felt both haunting and liberating. My younger self had called upon me to honor the promise of self-discovery, to embrace change, and to take bold steps, not just for myself, but as an example for those who follow. I realized that my decisions were never isolated. They rippled through my family, influencing my children, grandchildren, and the way they viewed their own lives. The notion that I could instill a sense of adventure simply by lived example began to outweigh my hesitations. Maybe it was time for me to embrace the unknown. While I sat in that chair, the sun dipping lower in the sky, I understood that life had given me an opportunity to make a choice that would honor both my past and my future. Moving didn't mean abandoning the love I had cultivated in my life. It meant finding a new way to express it, to further enrich the tapestry of our family's story. I could carry the wisdom of my years with me while exploring new landscapes, new friendships, and perhaps new reflections of who I had yet to become. Strength didn't just reside in holding on to what was known. It also lay in the willingness to let go, to leap into the vastness with open arms. As I took a deep breath, the decision settled within me like a warm embrace, and I knew that embracing change was not just an act of rebellion against complacency, it was a celebration of life itself. As I sit here, the gentle light of the afternoon sun spilling through my window, I find a strange comfort in the dust motes dancing in the air. It feels like a blessing, a reminder that time, in all its relentless passage, also offers moments of reflection and clarity. The letter from 1973, a whisper from a life I almost left behind, has woven itself into the very fabric of my being. It spoke of dreams unfulfilled, of paths diverged, and of love that lingered long after the final goodbyes. I can almost hear the laughter of my younger self echoing through the years, a soft melody that reminds me of the beauty and fragility of our choices. I am at peace with the decisions I have made, the places I have called home, and the people who have touched my heart. Each wrinkle on my hands tells a story, each gray hair a testament to joys and sorrows that have shaped me. And while the world outside continues to spin with its frenetic energy, I sit quietly, cradling these memories, grateful for the journey that has led me here. I understand now that home is not merely a location, it is a tapestry woven from love, memories, and the warmth of shared laughter. I have chosen to stay, to embrace the familiar, to allow my roots to deepen in this soil that has nurtured me through the years. And in this acceptance, I feel an overwhelming sense of freedom from the burdens of what could have been, and a profound appreciation for what is. If you listened until the end, thank you. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments which city you're watching from. Maybe the next story we tell here will be yours.